Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that three prisoners have completely disappeared from one of the most secure prisons in America. The prison was Alcatraz, located on an island in San Francisco Bay. It was surrounded by cold water and strong currents, making escape extremely difficult. Because of its location and strict security, Alcatraz became known as the Rock. But in 1962, three prisoners decided to attempt something that seemed almost impossible. Their names were Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. They secretly began planning their escape, but escaping from the prison would be only the beginning of their dangerous journey. The biggest question was, could they actually survive after leaving the island? Plan. Frank Morris was known for being intelligent and careful. The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, also had experience with construction work. The three men knew that escaping through the main doors was impossible, so they searched for another way out. Behind their cells, they discovered weak areas in the walls. They began secretly making the openings larger using small, ordinary objects. They worked slowly and carefully, making sure the guards would not notice. But escaping from the cells was only one part of their plan. They also needed to fool the guards during the nightly inspections. So they came up with an incredible idea. They would create fake heads that looked like real prisoners sleeping in their beds. But could this strange trick really fool the guards? The most surprising part of their plan was the fake heads. The three prisoners used materials such as soap, paper, hair, and other objects to create heads that looked like real human heads from a distance. At night, they placed the fake heads on their pillows and arranged their blankets carefully. From outside the cells, it appeared that the prisoners were peacefully sleeping. But underneath this illusion, something very different was happening. While the guards believed the men were in their beds, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers were secretly preparing the final stages of their escape. They had spent months planning and working in secret. Now everything depended on one night. And that night finally arrived. It was June 11th, 1962. On the night of June 11th, 1962, Alcatraz became quiet. The three prisoners waited for the right moment. When they believed it was safe, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin left their cells through the escape route they had secretly prepared. They made their way through the prison and eventually reached the outside. But they still had one major challenge ahead. They had to cross the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. The three men had prepared a homemade raft for the journey. It was made from materials they had secretly collected inside the prison. They knew the water could be extremely dangerous, and there was no guarantee that their raft would survive the journey. Still, they continued with their plan. Then, under the cover of darkness, the three men disappeared toward the water. Nobody knew where they were going, and nobody knew whether they would ever reach the other side. The next morning, the prison guards began their usual inspection. At first, everything appeared normal. The three prisoners seemed to be sleeping peacefully in their beds. But when the guards looked more closely, they noticed something strange. The heads on the pillows were not real. They were fake. The guards immediately realized that Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin were missing. A massive search began throughout Alcatraz. Authorities searched the prison, the island, and the surrounding waters. They also looked for any evidence that could explain where the prisoners had gone. Some personal belongings connected to the escape were discovered. Possible pieces of their homemade raft were also found. But there was one thing authorities could not find: the three prisoners themselves. Were they still alive? Or had the cold waters of San Francisco Bay taken them away? This is where the mystery becomes even more interesting. According to the official investigation, it was considered possible that the three prisoners did not survive the journey. The water around Alcatraz was extremely cold, and the strong currents could make the crossing very dangerous. But there was a major problem with that theory. Their bodies were never conclusively recovered. Because of this, some people began to believe that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers may have survived. Over the years, photographs and different reports appeared claiming that the men might have escaped and started new lives under different identities. Some people believed they reached the mainland. Others believe they died in the water. But despite all the stories and claims, no evidence has ever conclusively proven that the three men survived. So the question remains, did they really make it across the bay? Alcatraz prison closed in 1963, only about a year after the famous escape. But the mystery of the three prisoners never disappeared. Even after decades, nobody has been able to say with certainty what happened to Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. Did they disappear beneath the waves? Did the homemade raft carry them safely across the bay? Or did they somehow reach the mainland and begin completely new lives? The truth may never be known. What makes this story so fascinating is that three prisoners managed to disappear from one of America's most secure prisons, leaving behind fake heads, an escape route, and a homemade raft. But they left no definite proof of where they went. More than 60 years later, their final fate remains one of America's most famous unsolved mysteries. The story of the Alcatraz escape remains a mystery even today. Three prisoners entered the darkness of the night with a carefully planned escape. They fooled the guards with fake heads, left the prison, and headed toward the dangerous waters of San Francisco Bay. After that, nobody knows exactly what happened. Maybe the three men drowned during the journey. Maybe they reached the mainland and disappeared into a new life. Or perhaps the truth is somewhere between these possibilities. No one has ever found conclusive evidence that tells us exactly how their story ended. And that is why the Alcatraz escape continues to fascinate people around the world. So what do you think? Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers survive their journey across the sea? Or did the dangerous waters become the end of their escape? Share your opinion in the comments. And if you enjoy true stories, historical mysteries, and unexplained events, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more fascinating stories.